Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're heading back to ancient Rome
Ooh, okay.
to take a closer look at one of its most infamous emperors.
Nero.
Yeah, a figure who most people think of with tyranny and excess, but like a lot of figures in history,
Right.
there's always more to the story.
Always more than meets the eye. And so today we are diving into excerpts from Nero's Wikipedia page
Okay.
to explore the events of his reign, the historical interpretations of his very many actions, and really just try to unravel the enigma
Yeah.
that is Emperor Nero.
And this is a guy where it's really important to remember that the Nero we think we know
Right.
is really just a product of historical accounts written after his death. So
Exactly.
we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, let's set the stage a little bit. Nero wasn't just any Roman emperor, right? He was part of the Julio-Claudian dynasty.
This is like Roman royalty.
Yeah.
This is the imperial family descended from Augustus himself.
Okay, so big shoes to fill.
Talk about big shoes to fill.
Oh.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, Nero's path to power
Yeah.
was anything but conventional.
Yeah. How?
It's closely tied to the ambition
Okay.
of his mother,
Of course.
Agrippina the Younger.
Agrippina the Younger, Agrippina herself, descended from Augustus,
Right.
was a powerful woman in a world dominated by men, and she maneuvered her way into a position to advance her son's claim to that throne.
And she got it.
She did.
She did. But that brings us to another really fascinating point, which is that Nero was only 17 when he became emperor.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine being 17
He's so young.
and ruling an empire as vast as Rome?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to shape how your reign goes, for sure.
Yeah, and we think of Nero often again as this tyrant from day one, but his early years as emperor were surprisingly different.
Different. How so?
So different. Most people think of him as a tyrant from day one.
Right. Well, we're getting that from sources much later on.
Okay.
The first 5 years of his reign. Historians often call this the Quinquennium Neronis, was really marked by peace and prosperity.
Quinquennium Neronis. What does that even mean?
It's a mouthful, right?
It is a mouthful.
But basically, the first 5 years of Nero,
I got it.
and a lot of good things happened.
What kind of good thing? What kind of policies?
So he actually implemented tax reforms, which were super popular.
Really?
Yeah, he changed the tax system itself to try to make it fairer for Romans.
Wow. Anytime you can reform taxes with an emperor, I feel like you're doing something right.
Yeah, that's a good way to make people happy.
Yeah. Were there other policies enacted during this time?
He also worked to stop the mistreatment of slaves. He even allowed them to file complaints against their masters with authorities.
Wow.
Imagine that, a Roman emperor giving a voice to the voiceless.
That does paint a very different picture.
Right.
So we've got a young emperor, ambitious descent from this powerful lineage, making strides in tax reform and even addressing, like, social injustice.
It's completely different than this image that would later define him in the history books.
Fascinating. Okay.
But this period of stability and progress, it wasn't going to last forever.
Right.
And a pivotal moment, one that really casts a shadow over his reign, is the death of his mother, Agrippina.
Yeah, okay, this is like a turning point in a lot of Roman history, it seems like.
Okay.
What do we know?
Right.
What did the sources tell us about how she died?
So it's a dramatic story, and like a lot of things from this era shrouded in some mystery. But the historical accounts all agree that Nero had something to do with his mother's death.
Wow, that's a pretty serious accusation. What do they actually say happened?
So Suetonius, who wrote about the lives of all the Caesars, right? He claims Nero first tried to kill his mother in like this elaborate scheme with a collapsing boat.
A collapsing boat, like why so extra?
Yeah, talk about indirect.
Right.
But she survived. Agrippina survived. She swam to shore only to be met by Nero's men and ultimately killed.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's cold. Are there any other accounts of this, or is that...
Yeah, so Tacitus, who was writing a few decades after Suetonius, he offers up a slightly different take on it. He suggests that Nero was motivated by his relationship with Poppaea Sabina.
Oh, so a love triangle with deadly consequences.
Basically,
Who is this woman?
Poppaea was a Roman noblewoman. She was ambitious herself. And if we believe Tacitus, it was Poppaea who encouraged Nero to get rid of Agrippina, who was not a fan of their relationship.
Okay, this is so interesting, right? Because it shows how history can be interpreted in different ways.
Exactly.
Depending on who's telling the story or what their angle is, we get a very different version of the story.
Totally. And it really highlights how important it is to look at all these sources critically, right? What are the biases involved? What are they trying to say? And ultimately acknowledge that we might never know exactly what happened.
Right. We're just piecing together the puzzle with the pieces that we have.
Yeah.
So Agrippina's death obviously casts this dark cloud over Nero's reign, but did it actually change the course of his rule, or is this just like a dramatic thing that happened?
It's hard to say for sure, but a lot of historians agree that Nero's behavior and the way he governed did shift pretty noticeably after Agrippina died.
Okay, in what ways?
Well, he starts undertaking these ambitious construction projects. Some might even call them extravagant, like the Domus Transitoria. Have you heard of this?
No.
It was this immense palace meant to connect all of his imperial estates.
A whole palace just to connect his other palaces? That's next level.
Right.
That's extra.
And people saw it as really excessive, especially since Rome was still recovering from a recent fire that had, devastated the city.
Oh, right.
So this Domus Transitoria, while it might have been cool to look at, really rubbed people the wrong way.
Yeah, priorities.
Exactly.
So speaking of priorities, Nero also had a thing for spectacle and entertainment, right?
Yeah, he did. He loved putting on these lavish games, these public spectacles.
Got to keep the people happy. Got to keep them
Gives
distracted.
them red bread and circuses.
Nice.
It's a classic for a reason. But yeah, with Nero, it might have gone a little bit overboard.
Just a tad.
Yeah.
Okay, so this all kind of leads up to, I think, the big event that everyone thinks of when they think of Nero, the Great Fire of Rome.
Oh, yeah.
Can you set the scene for us?
So it's 64 AD, right? Rome, a fire breaks out and it just consumes the city. I mean, flames everywhere. It raged for over a week, destroying entire districts, leaving thousands of people homeless. It was a huge economic and physical blow to the city.
Yeah, that's devastating. So where does Nero fit into all of this? Was he actually responsible for the fire, like some people say?
It's the question, right? Did Nero fiddle while Rome burned?
Right.
And unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of rumors, speculation, conflicting accounts. It's hard to say for sure.
Okay, so let's get into those conflicting accounts. What are some of the different theories about how the fire started?
So Suetonius, who always loves to make Nero look bad, he claims Nero actually started the fire himself.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his motive was to clear land for his grand Golden House project, this massive palace he wanted to build that would have had artificial lakes and this huge, colossal statue of himself.
Talk about a power move. To orchestrate a disaster just to build a bigger palace.
Yeah, it's a wild accusation, and one that's definitely stuck with Nero throughout history. But Tacitus, who also wrote about the fire, he offers a different view. He says Nero was actually away from Rome when the fire started, and when he heard about it, he rushed back and even used his own money to help with the relief efforts.
Okay, so two very different sides of the story.
Right.
One is like this callous arsonist. The other one's like a compassionate leader responding to this crisis.
Yeah.
How do we figure out what actually happened?
Right. This is where historians come in, right? We have to look at the sources, think about their biases, see if there's any other evidence that could back up their claims. And unfortunately, in this case, there's really no smoking gun.
So the mystery continues.
Yeah.
But there's another element to this, isn't
Yeah.
there? I mean, didn't Nero use this tragedy to target a specific group in Roman society?
That's right. Tacitus mentions these rumors that Nero blamed Christians for the fire.
Of course, the classic scapegoat.
Right. Blaming this marginalized group who were already viewed with suspicion by a lot of people was a way to deflect blame and maybe, calm the public down a little.
Always the convenient tactic.
Yeah, and what followed were these brutal persecutions of Christians. They were subjected to horrific punishments. Tacitus even describes them being thrown to wild animals, crucified, and burned alive.
That's awful.
Yeah.
So even if he didn't start the fire, things are not looking good for Nero or his reign at this point.
Not at all. The fire, the accusations, the persecutions, it all adds up to this growing sense of unrest and unease in Roman society.
Yeah. So we've got this really complex picture of Nero,
Yeah.
right? A leader who could do good things for Rome, but also someone drawn to extravagance and capable of real ruthlessness.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what ultimately leads to his downfall?
It's definitely a big part of it as his reign went on, his lifestyle, all that extravagance and the way he ruled. He made some powerful enemies.
Yeah.
And eventually that tension boiled over into a full-blown rebellion.
Okay. Tell me about this rebellion, who started it and what happened.
So it starts with this guy, Gaius Julius Vindex. He was the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, basically a Roman province in what's now France.
Okay.
He was fed up with Nero's tax policies and just unhappy with his rule in general, and that's what sparked the revolt.
It seems like taxes were always a touchy subject back then.
Yeah, but you'd think emperors would learn, right?
Right.
But anyway, Vindex's rebellion was a big deal, but it probably wouldn't have been enough to take down Nero on its own.
Okay.
What really changed things was when another key figure joined the rebellion, Servius Sulpicius Galba, the governor of Hispania Tarraconensis.
Hispania Tarraconensis, wasn't that like modern-day Spain?
Yeah, you got it. And Galba joining the rebellion was a huge turning point. He was a seasoned military leader, he had a lot of support, and he even got the Roman Senate on his side.
Oh, wow, that's big to have the Senate turn against Nero. That must have been a huge blow. How did Nero react when he realized how serious this was?
He went through it all, denial, despair. He even thought about running away from Rome altogether.
Can you imagine the emperor of Rome on the run? Where would he even go?
Some accounts say he was thinking about seeking refuge with the Parthians,
Who were they again?
Rome's biggest rivals in the East. They were always going head to head.
Right.
Nero even started writing this speech begging the Roman people to forgive him, trying to save his own skin.
Wow, a last-ditch effort to win back the public.
Did it work?
Nope. In the end, he just couldn't do it. He couldn't rally the support, and he couldn't face the music for what he had done. So he took off from Rome with just a few loyal followers.
So what happens to Nero? How does it all end?
He ends up in this villa outside Rome, and once he realizes there's no way out, he takes his own life.
Really, suicide.
That's what most sources say. But you know how history is? There are always whispers that maybe it wasn't that simple.
Yeah, like maybe someone helped him along or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's possible a loyal follower might have helped him to avoid a worse fate, or maybe someone else entirely wanted to make sure he was gone. The truth is, we'll probably never know for sure.
Fittingly mysterious end to a mysterious reign. So Nero's dead. What happens to Rome? How do they react? It was a mixed bag, really. Some people celebrated his death, and others were genuinely sad to see him go.
It's interesting. Who would actually mourn the death of an emperor with such a, tyrannical reputation?
It was the everyday people, actually, especially the ones who benefited from his building projects, his games, his efforts to keep food prices down. They felt like they'd lost someone who looked out for them.
Wow, it just goes to show you that there's always more to the story.
Always.
And that history is often written by the victors.
It makes you wonder whose voices were missing, right? Whose stories didn't get told.
Exactly. Well, this has been a fascinating look at Nero. I mean, we've covered his controversial rise to power, his ambition, his love for the arts, the great fire of Rome, everything leading up to his dramatic downfall.
It's amazing how one emperor can be associated with so much drama.
It really is. And it's a reminder that history is more than just names and dates. It's about real people with their own flaws and ambitions and triumphs. And even though Nero lived centuries ago, his story still resonates today. It makes you think about power, about leadership, about how we shape our own narratives.
It's a story full of twists and turns, and it makes you realize that we can't always trust everything we read in the history books. We have to look at things from multiple perspectives, consider the biases, and ask the tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's it for our deep dive into the life and times of Emperor Nero. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so are you ready to dive into the most fascinating landscape ever?
Absolutely.
It's the one inside your own head.
It is incredible.
You guys gave us a mountain of info from Wikipedia about the human brain.
Yeah.
And we're here to help you climb it.
Yeah, this is not a gentle hike at all. This is we're talking Everest here.
Yeah.
We're scaling those peaks of scientific understanding.
I love that.
We're going down into those intricate valleys of brain structure. And who knows, we might even uncover a few hidden caves of insight along the way.
Ooh, I love that analogy.
Right.
So you want to understand your brain better.
Yes.
You sent us this dense Wikipedia article.
Yes, we did.
Which honestly covers enough ground to make your head spin.
It really does. It's impressive. Just the sheer amount of information.
It's a lot.
It covers everything from how the brain develops to how scientists actually study it.
Right.
But you're right, it's a lot to digest.
It is.
So that's what we're here for. We're going to break it down piece by piece. Pull out the most interesting points and explain it in a way that makes sense.
Okay.
Even if you've never even looked at a neuroscience textbook.
I like it.
Sound good?
Yeah. Let's start with the basics.
Okay.
The brain's anatomy.
Okay.
The article kicks off by comparing the brain to a city, which I think is a really helpful image.
It is. It's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because it is like a busy city up there.
Total.
So think of the cerebrum.
Okay.
The biggest part of your brain is this bustling metropolis.
Okay.
This is where your thoughts, your decisions, your personality even.
It's the command center.
It really is.
Everything.
It's the command center for like all your conscious actions.
Right.
And the home of your higher cognitive functions.
That's a big job.
Huge job.
Yeah.
Which it handles really well.
Right.
So that you've got the cerebellum.
Okay.
Which is more like, I don't know if you've ever been to like a really well-run factory or like an industrial district.
Yes.
That's what it's like.
Okay.
It's very organized.
Keeping everything running smoothly.
Ensuring that all your movements are smooth and coordinated.
It's the logistics center
for
your brain.
Have you ever wondered how you can walk and talk at the same time without like...
Face planting?
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank your cerebellum.
It's a good one.
It's a good one, right?
Yeah. And just like a city needs a reliable power supply.
Yes.
Your brain relies on the brain stem, that
Yes.
transportation hub.
The connection.
That keeps everything connected.
Everything connected and functioning.
Heartbeat, breathing.
Vital functions.
Those vital functions we rarely think about.
Never think about it.
All managed by the brainstem.
All managed by the brainstem.
Wow, what a champ.
Right?
The brainstem's doing a lot of work back there.
A lot of work that we take for granted.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
This city we've been talking about,
Yes.
it has some seriously tight security.
Oh, really?
We're talking like
Fort Knox?
Fort Knox of the brain.
Okay.
The blood-brain barrier.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's like this cellular border patrol
Okay.
that meticulously controls
Okay.
what gets in and out of your brain.
So it's like a bouncer at a club.
Exactly.
Who only lets in the VIPs.
The VIPs are
Essential nutrients.
Yes.
Oxygen.
very important.
While keeping out
All the riffraff,
the troublemakers,
toxins,
all the bad stuff.
pathogens.
Yes.
Wow. That's...
A crucial defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Because the brain is so important, we got to keep it safe.
Right.
So now, nestled within this bustling brain city,
Yes.
you'll find a small almond-shaped structure
Okay.
called the amygdala.
The amygdala.
The amygdala. Now, don't let its size fool you. This little guy plays a big role,
The big role.
especially when it comes to your emotions.
Yes. Emotions are key here.
Okay.
Remember that time you had to like slam on your brakes to avoid an accident?
Oh, yeah?
That sudden jolt of fear? The heart-pounding adrenaline rush.
Yes.
That's your amygdala kicking into high gear.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It's like the brain's own personal alarm system,
Okay.
constantly scanning for threats
Right.
and triggering that fight or flight response
To keep us safe.
to keep you safe.
I've definitely felt that kick in before.
Oh, we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
It's a primal response,
Yeah.
like hardwired into our brains
Right.
over millions of years of evolution.
Wow.
But speaking of wiring,
Yes.
let's talk about how your brain is organized.
Okay.
Because it's not just one big homogeneous mass, right?
Right.
Different regions specialize in different tasks.
So it's like different neighborhoods
Exactly.
in our brain city, each with their own
Precisely.
unique function.
And one of those fascinating aspects of this organization
Yes.
is something called lateralization,
Okay.
the division of labor
Okay.
between the left and right hemispheres of your brain.
So that's like the whole left brain, right brain thing.
Exactly. You've probably heard those terms.
Oh, yeah.
Left-brained,
Right.
brained. Like left-brained people are more logical,
Yeah.
analytical.
Right.
Right-brained folks are more like creative and artistic.
It is a little more nuanced than that,
Okay.
but there is some truth to it.
Okay.
For example, in most people, language processing is primarily handled by the left hemisphere.
Which explains why I can string together a coherent sentence.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Sometimes.
Meanwhile, the right hemisphere excels at spatial awareness,
Okay.
recognizing faces,
Okay.
processing emotions.
So like navigating a new city.
Yes.
Or interpreting someone's facial expressions.
Exactly.
That's all right hemisphere.
Like
Yeah.
your right hemisphere hard at work.
Wow.
Pretty cool, huh?
It is cool how these two hemispheres are constantly like communicating and working together, even though they have their own specialties.
It's amazing
It really is.
how the brain can do that.
Yeah, how do scientists even begin to unravel these complexities?
Right.
I mean, the brain is literally hidden inside our skulls.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate black box, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's what makes it so exciting.
Okay.
Because for centuries,
Yeah.
our understanding of the brain was limited to like studying brains post-mortem
Right.
or observing the effects of like tragic injuries.
Right.
But in recent decades, there have been some incredible breakthroughs
Okay.
in brain imaging technologies.
Okay. So we're talking like being able to see thoughts in action.
Well, not quite that literal,
Okay.
but we're getting closer.
Right.
One of the most revolutionary techniques
Yes.
is functional magnetic resonance imaging.
Oh, okay.
or fMRI.
fMRI, I've heard of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, fMRI measures changes in blood flow within the brain.
Okay.
So in a specific area, the brain is more active, it requires more blood flow.
It's like when you work out, your muscles need more oxygen.
Exactly.
So if you're looking at an fMRI scan and you see a region light up,
Yes.
that means that part of the brain is firing away.
Yeah. You got it. That's exactly what it means.
Wow, that's so cool.
Isn't it amazing?
It really is.
So by having people perform different tasks or experience different emotions,
Okay.
while they're inside this fMRI scanner, scientists can actually pinpoint which brain regions are involved in those activities.
So they can see, like, your brain on love
Exactly.
or your brain on a math problem.
Precisely.
That's amazing.
It's like watching the brain light up in response to the world around us.
That is really cool. I knew brain imaging was advanced, but that is incredible.
Oh, it's advanced.
It's like having a window into the inner workings of our mind.
It really is. And it's not just fMRI either.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. There are other techniques like electroencephalography or EEG,
Okay.
which measures electrical activity in the brain,
Okay.
and magnetoencephalography,
Yeah.
or MEG,
Yay.
which detects tiny magnetic fields
Okay.
produced by brain activity.
So we have all these different ways of basically eavesdropping on the
Yes.
brain's conversation.
We're listening in.
That's pretty wild.
It is wild. And the more we learn, the more we realize just how complex
Yeah.
and interconnected everything is.
Right.
So we've talked about the brain's structure,
Yes.
its function,
Yes.
and how we even study it.
Yeah.
But what happens when things go wrong?
Yeah. That's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah,
It is a bit daunting to think about, honestly.
it can be.
This article mentions, like, strokes Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
It really highlights how fragile the brain can be.
It's true. The brain is vulnerable,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly resilient.
Okay.
And one of the most remarkable examples of this resilience is neuroplasticity.
Okay, I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
But I'll admit I'm a little fuzzy on the details.
Yeah,
It
me-
sounds like something out of a superhero movie.
It kind of is. Like
Mhm.
neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire itself,
Okay.
to form new connections between neurons,
Wow.
and even like change its physical structure
What?
throughout life.
No way.
Yeah.
So it's not like our brains are set in stone once we reach a certain age.
Not at all. Think of it like this.
Okay.
Your brain is like a forest path.
Okay.
The more you walk that path, the more defined it becomes.
Right.
But if you start taking a different route,
Yeah.
even if it's initially overgrown with enough time and effort,
Yeah.
you can create a new, clear pathway.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
Right.
So even if part of the brain is damaged,
Yeah.
it can learn to adapt and find new ways to function.
Exactly. And a great example of this is stroke recovery.
Okay.
So after a stroke, some people experience like language difficulties
Right.
because the part of their brain responsible for language has been damaged.
Right.
But through speech therapy and rehabilitation,
Okay.
the brain can actually reroute those language functions to other areas,
Wow.
allowing for significant recovery.
That's incredible. It's like the brain has its own internal healing mechanism.
It really does. And the more we learn about neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
the more potential we see for treating a range of conditions. Okay. From traumatic brain injuries to even learning disabilities.
So it's not just about treating what's broken.
Right.
It's about optimizing what's already there.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of the brain,
Okay.
an interaction with the world around us.
Okay.
The article mentions the societal and cultural impact of the brain,
Okay.
but I think it's just as important to consider how society and culture actually shape our brains.
That is an interesting thought. I mean, we know our environment influences our behavior,
Right.
but are you saying it can actually change the physical structure of our brains?
Precisely, think about it.
Yeah.
Your brain didn't evolve in isolation.
Right.
It evolved to adapt to this complex social world.
Yeah.
A world of language, culture, and like shared experiences.
Right.
And those experiences leave their mark on the brain quite literally.
Do you have an example of that?
One of the most compelling examples is the impact of bilingualism.
Okay.
So studies have shown that people who speak 2 or more languages fluently have increased gray matter density
Wow.
in certain areas of the brain compared to monolingual individuals.
So learning a new language actually makes your brain physically different.
It does.
Wow.
And these differences are thought to reflect the cognitive demands
Okay.
of juggling multiple languages,
Okay.
such as enhanced attention control and executive function.
That's remarkable. So it's not just what's encoded in our genes.
Right.
Our brains are being shaped by our experiences
Yes,
throughout our lives.
exactly. And this has profound implications
Okay.
because it means that we have a certain degree of agency in shaping our own brains,
Right.
what we choose to engage in, the environments we surround ourselves with.
Yeah.
These all contribute to like the ongoing sculpting of our neural pathways.
That's both empowering and a bit daunting.
It is, isn't it?
It is. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the basic structure of the brain
Yeah.
to its incredible ability to adapt and change.
Amazing, isn't it?
It really is. But before we wrap up, I have to ask.
If you could enhance one aspect of your own brain,
Okay.
what would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I know, right?
There's so many possibilities.
So many.
I think I would choose to enhance my capacity for empathy.
Oh.
Imagine a world where everyone could truly understand and share the feelings of others.
Yeah.
It'd be revolutionary.
That's a good one. I love that for me it would be focus.
Focus?
In this age of constant distraction.
Oh, tell me about it.
I know, right? The ability to truly hone in on one task and just shut out the noise
Yeah.
feels like a superpower.
And perhaps the human brain is capable of extraordinary things.
It really is.
And the more we learn about it, the
Yeah.
more we realize how much more there is to discover.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive
I agree.
into the amazing world of the human brain.
It's a fascinating place.
We've explored its structure,
Yes.
its function,
Yes.
resilience,
It's very resilient.
and its remarkable ability to adapt and change throughout our lives.
Yeah.
It really is quite incredible.
It really is. So to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this journey inside your own head.
Yes, and remember, this is just the beginning of your own exploration.
That's right.
There's a universe of knowledge out there,
Yes.
and a whole lot of it is dedicated to understanding the most complex object in the known universe,
Ooh.
your brain.
Ooh, I like that.
Keep learning,
Yes.
keep questioning,
Yes.
and most importantly, keep marveling at the wonders of your own mind.
Oh, I like that a lot. Well said.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something that probably sounds familiar, the tree of life. I mean, we've all seen the diagrams, right? But there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those deceptively simple metaphors that has captivated scientists and philosophers for centuries.
And you know me, I love a good origin story. So we're going way back, beyond Darwin, back to some early interpretations of the tree of life that honestly surprised me.
Oh, are you talking about the priests? With the trees?
You know it. I had no idea. Tell me everything. Priests drawing trees of life. What's the story there?
Well, picture this. It's 1801, and Augustin Augier, a priest, sketches out what he calls the arbre botanique. Looks familiar, right? Branches, leaves, the whole shebang. But hold on. Augier wasn't interested in evolution. Not one bit.
Okay, so what was he going for with this botanical masterpiece?
For him, it was all about divine order. It was his way of showing how God, in his view, had structured the natural world, like a giant divinely ordained filing cabinet for all of creation.
Wow. Same visual, completely different meaning, but it makes you think. The tree metaphor is really hardwired into how we understand the world, isn't it? Even back then.
It really is. And get this, just a few years later, in 1809, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, a naturalist, he comes along and draws his own version of this branching diagram. But here's the twist. Lamarck's tree, it didn't necessarily have one single starting point. He imagined life advancing, get this, in parallel lines, like multiple origins of life. Can you imagine?
Whoa, 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 back up. So instead of one big happy family tree, he's saying life's more like multiple family reunions happening at the same time. That's wild.
It's a wild idea, right? Lamarck might not have gotten everything right, but you gotta give him credit for thinking outside the box.
Totally. And it just goes to show you how scientists, even back then, were grappling with these huge questions about the history of life on Earth. And speaking of grappling with big questions, enter Charles Darwin. I mean, he's the first guy most people think of when they hear tree of life. So how to use it on the origin of species?
Okay, so his diagram, iconic. It's practically the logo for evolution itself, right? But here's the thing. People often think it's the whole shebang, the entire tree of life. But it's not. It's more like zooming in on just one branch. He was looking specifically at how species within a genus change over time.
So it's like focusing on a tiny section of the whole forest.
Exactly. Think of it like those close-up nature documentaries. They're not showing you the whole ecosystem, just the fascinating dynamics of, like, a single anthill or something.
I can get behind that. It's all about the details.
Yeah.
So Darwin's tree shows how species split and diverge.
Yeah.
But let's be real, not every branch survives.
Right. Extinction is a big part of the story, too. And Darwin, he didn't shy away from that. In fact, he describes it in this really vivid way. He compares extinct species to twigs that get overgrown and choked out in a dense forest.
That's actually a really powerful image, survival of the fittest, literally playing out in the struggle for sunlight and nutrients.
He was a naturalist at heart, Darwin, always drawing on those real-world observations. And those descriptions, they weren't just for show. He really wanted to drive home this idea that evolution is messy. It's not some neat and tidy straight line from point A to point B. There are dead ends everywhere.
Speaking of not so straight lines, let's talk about Ernst Haeckel. Now, this guy, he really took the whole tree of life concept and ran with it.
Oh, yeah. Talk about ambitious. Haeckel's tree, which he published in 1866, was one of the first to try and represent all of life's diversity in a single diagram. We're talking plants, animals, even those weird little microorganisms nobody knew what to do with back then.
He was really trying to create the first comprehensive family portrait of life on Earth.
Exactly. And he even organized it all into three main kingdoms: plants, protists, and, of course, animals. It was a bold move.
And he put humans right at the top, didn't he? Like we're the grand finale of evolution.
Well, yeah, you could say that. Haeckel's tree definitely put humans front and center, like the crowning achievement of it all. It was a pretty common viewpoint back then.
It's a bit like he saw the tree of life as a ladder, with humans on the top rung. It's interesting how our understanding of things has changed since then. Nowadays, we're all about biodiversity and how interconnected everything is.
Exactly. It makes you think about how our scientific models, even the ones that seem really objective, can be shaped by the cultural biases of the time.
Totally. It's a good reminder that science is always evolving, just like the life it's trying to understand. But okay, back to the trees. We've got these grand sweeping visions of life's history from Haeckel and others. So by this point, you'd think scientists were just filling in the blanks, right?
If only it were that simple. Science is never truly finished. There's always something new to discover, something that shakes things up.
And there's a pretty big shakeup in the world of the tree of life, right? Something about domains.
Oh, you better believe it. This was a game changer. It all went down in 1990. Three scientists, Carl Woese, Otto Candler, and Mark Wheelis, they dropped this bombshell on the scientific community. They introduced this whole new way of organizing life. They called them domains.
Domains. Okay, hold on. Now I'm picturing websites and internet stuff. Is there some connection I'm missing here?
Not quite. These are biological domains. Think of them as the highest level of classification for life. And they found three...
build plants and animals anymore. What exactly do these domains represent?
They represent a fundamental shift in how we understand the very foundation of the tree of life. You see, before this, we pretty much divided life into two big categories: prokaryotes, which are single-celled organisms without a nucleus, and eukaryotes, which have cells with a nucleus, like you and me and all other plants and animals.
Right, basic biology stuff. I vaguely remember learning that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets wild. These scientists, they looked at the genetic material of these organisms and they discovered something amazing. Some of those prokaryotes, the ones we now call archaea, they were actually more closely related to eukaryotes than they were to the other prokaryotes, the bacteria.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind here. So that whole prokaryote-eukaryote split that seems so clear-cut, it wasn't the whole story?
Nope. It was like finding out your family tree had a whole hidden branch, a huge chunk of life we hadn't even categorized correctly.
That's incredible. It really shows you how new technologies and ways of looking at things can completely change our understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And it meant redrawing the tree of life in a big way. Oh, but hold on, it gets even weirder. Have you ever heard of horizontal gene transfer?
I think so, but remind me, it sounds kind of messy.
It is kind of messy. It basically means that organisms, especially microorganisms, can swap genes directly. It's like they're trading genetic information even between different species.
Like what? So instead of just inheriting genes vertically from parent to offspring, genes are just jumping around, like bacteria trading genetic tips and tricks.
Pretty much. It's kind of like if you imagine two branches on a tree, instead of growing separately, they intertwine and fuse together, sharing some of their genetic material.
So it's not just this straight line from ancestor to descendant. It's more like this tangled web of branches constantly intersecting, sharing genetic information.
Exactly. It definitely makes things more complex than that simple tree analogy we often use.
But if it's so complicated, if the tree of life isn't really a perfect tree, why even bother with it? Why not find a new metaphor?
Well, because it still gets at something really important about life. It might not be perfectly accurate, but it shows us how everything's connected.
Even if those connections are messy and tangled, it's still saying we all share a common history, right?
Exactly. It's a framework, a way for us to understand this vast, incredible web of life. It helps us see patterns, connections we might not even notice otherwise.
Like how those three scientists, Woolsey and the others, they totally changed our view of early life with those domains, right?
Absolutely. And who knows what else is out there waiting to be discovered, what other surprises are hidden in those branches.
Makes you think, doesn't it? All these mysteries just waiting to be uncovered. It's pretty awe-inspiring if you ask me.
Definitely. There's so much we don't know, so much left to learn, and that's what makes science so fascinating, right? It's a never-ending journey of discovery.
And speaking of discoveries, for everyone listening, here's something to chew on. We talked about horizontal gene transfer. It was rampant in early life, right? So imagine going back billions of years to the very base of the tree of life. What did that even look like? If genes were constantly being swapped, was there even a single trunk? Or was it more like a tangled network, a primordial soup of genetic exchange? It's a question that still gets scientists debating today, and it shows you just how much there is to discover about our planet's incredible history.
It's humbling, isn't it, to think about how much we still don't know.
It really is. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Tree of Life for today. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the twists and turns of this incredible concept. Until next time, keep those questions coming.